Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to one of the online talks organized by the Literature, Arts and Performance Research Group at the University of Valencia. We are delighted to have Ian Rickson as our guest today. It is both a privilege and a pleasure to have you again with us, even if it's online. We were lucky enough to have Ian a couple of years ago here in Valencia. It was a fantastic experience. It is difficult not to be acquainted with Ian Rickson's professional career. Therefore, I will only provide a very brief summary of his main achievements, so as not to take up too much of his speaking time. Ian Rickson, as you know, was artistic director at the Royal Court Theatre from 1998 to 2006, during which time he directed Krapp's Last Tape, The Winterling, Alice Trilogy, Mouth to Mouth. We transferred to the West End, The Weir, also at the West End and Broadway, and The Seagull, also at Broadway, and many other plays. And his work in the theatre includes All of Us, Paradise, translations, and very other plays at the National Theatre. Also Hamlet, Hedda Gabler, Betrayal, and so many other shows. I'm unable to select all of them for this presentation. His films include Fallout, Krapp's Last Tape, and The Clear Road Ahead. He also works, as we will see today, with PJ Harvey and Kate Tempest on the live music and poetry shows, and was visiting professor at the University of Kent. So today, as I said before, we are delighted to have him as one of the guests of our online talks to talk to us about the recent production of London Tide by Ben Power, with songs by PJ Harvey, which premiered, PJ Harvey and Ben Power, I should say, which premiered at the National Theatre in London on April 2024 as an adaptation of or inspired by Charles Dickens's Our Mutual Friend, which was first published in England in the 1860s as his last completed novel. And well, welcome, Ian, and thank you for joining us in this session.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with a couple of warming up questions. And the first one is, what brought you to direct London Tide at the National Theatre? And when did you begin with the project? Was this a long project? Was it not?
Well, the playwright, Ben Power, asked me to read the novel, and he wondered whether it would make a good adaptation. I had never directed a literary adaptation before, and the book is enormous, and it's a really complicated book. But we, over a number of years, to answer the second question, started putting scenes on their feet, using the dialogue that Dickens, who loved the theatre and went to the theatre every night for some of his years, wrote very good dialogue, started to feel into the heart of the book. And through a lot of subsidy and privilege and space that we were given by the National, I would say over about 5 years, doing maybe 6 separate workshops, we got to a stage where we felt we could make a version of this book. But why? Why resuscitate a dysfunctional book from 1865? There are so many new playwrights and so many stories about now. I felt this book was urgent in the way it wrote about education, class, money, and it has a question right in the middle of it. Can people change? Are you defined by your birth? Or do you have the maneuverability to change? And as a socialist and as somebody who loves London, and the book is all about London, it felt to me purposeful and really exciting to get inside this book and try and find a way of making it speak now.
Well, thank you very much, because you give me the cue to ask you my second question, because that was going to be why Charles Dickens and why this particular novel. As I told you before, we are reading Hard Times with our students. It's one of the shortest, and I would say it's not a difficult novel for our students, and it speaks to our times as well. So that was going to be my second question. Why this particular novel?
I really love Hard Times, and I love the binary in the book between the Gradgrind, rote learning, very modern, unfortunately, educative way of drilling people for capitalism, making them into units of economic production, against the world of Sleary and the circus and the chaos. And I think that dichotomy is in many of Dickens' books. The side of controlling, and as a father, when he's writing Our Mutual Friend, he is jettisoning his sons, he's sending them off around the world to get rid of them. The avaricious, ambitious, tyrannical man, but then the man who knows that really life is about feeling and imagination and chaos and all of that. And I think Hard Times, there have been many theatrical adaptations of, and I can see why. It's it's an easier book to adapt. The challenges of Our Mutual Friend, where the main character is the river, felt to me exciting. Like, I don't know how to do that. And so I'd give it a crack. But really, it's the politics and the feeling that excited me in terms of what the book is doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for drawing our attention to these topics, because, well, in terms of our students in the audience, these are actually the topics that we are discussing in the classroom. I will ask you about characters, and I will ask you about the river later in the afternoon. First, I wanted to ask you about the creative process. You've already said that you spent over 5 years with the project, and I was wondering about the fact of collaborating with Ben Power and PJ Harvey. I will ask you about PJ Harvey more specifically in relation with their songs, but how was the creative process with Power? Was it the first time that you collaborated together, or how did these change from previous collaborations that you have worked with?
Yeah. First of all, in that 5 years, there was the pandemic, and I'm talking about maybe there was a week 1 year, 2 more weeks another year. So through a period of 5 years, fortunately, through subsidy, through a government that gives some money to theatres, we were given the space to excavate and work on this book. I brought PJ Harvey, who I've been to Spain with to open her European tours in Barcelona, and it's wonderful to be with her in Spain. I felt to have a contemporary artist attached to Dickens stopped Dickens being English heritage. So the English class system tends to co-opt the classics and make them seem safe and about bonnets and neckerchiefs, and makes them very full of cliche and quite comfortable. And I wanted the audience to feel that Dickens's origins from the gutter in London, there's an urgency to what he's writing about and writing against. And I felt if I had a contemporary artist like PJ Harvey doing the music, perhaps that would encourage a different kind of audience in to see Dickens that aren't just into literary heritage. And as to your second question, how did we work? I mean, I'm just going to demystify it for you, Laura. Going into a room and me as the director saying, okay, so there's this character and that character, and they meet in a graveyard. Well, let's just feel into that. Okay, he says that. Do we need that? Oh, and there's this element in that scene. Polly, PJ Harvey, is there a song here? Is there an origin story song about Bradley Headstone, who is one of the characters in the graveyard with Lizzie Hexam? Or another day, how do we do a river? Can you, this group over there, can you use a big sheet of plastic? This group, can you use some lights and some buckets of water? This group, can you use nothing? And it was just a kind of, I'm sure like your students, just playing, exploring to try and find a language.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you're touching upon many of the ideas, so the things that I wanted to ask you, because the minute I was lucky enough to saw the performance, as you know, last April, and I received the songs differently, obviously, than when I was rereading the play. And when I was rereading the play for the interview, I realized, for example, in the first song, she repeats, "This is the story of, this is the story about," and it is so lyric. And the lyricism of the song brought me back to the 19th century, but to William Blake and his approach to the city of London. And there's a lot of imaginary there: money, the city, London, the river. So one of my questions, I think that you have partially answered that already, was during this creative process, was it first your aesthetic idea and then Harvey putting in a song, or the other way around, or perhaps depending on the creative mood of the day, how this did work? Because it is, I saw that it was, they are very poetical.
I really love how you're drawing a narrative from William Blake through. And for me, PJ Harvey is an English balladeer. She's drawing from the kind of ballad which was very dominant in the 19th century. So the correspondence of those artists, and particularly Blake, and his kind of absolute belief in poetry and enchantment, but also his chronicling of capitalism, early Victorian industrial capitalism, goes into Dickens. And I think our mutual friend is so troubled by what London, the biggest city of empire, is becoming. So you've got that thesis. How do we look at Dickens? Like we say in England, a canary in a coal mine. Like you put a canary in a coal mine and it tells you when the air is toxic. Dickens, who was a journalist, is saying we need to really think about the way people are being educated. We need to really think about the way women have no power. And these things felt exciting. Polly Harvey would be in the room with her guitar or her piano, and she just loved being in rehearsals. I think for a rock star to actually just be with actors and do some warm-up games and maybe, I don't know, an improvisation or something was really great for her. And so songs, to answer your question, sometimes came quite organically, and sometimes Ben or I would say, "Is there a song for Lizzie Hexam?" And she'd say, "I'll go upstairs," and maybe she'd come back with one. Oh, that's exciting.
Oh, thank you. Must have been amazing. Now, some of the topics that you have also touched upon, or the images which are very well summarized in the title of the play, is London, and it is the river, it is the tide. We have been discussing in a research seminar that we have had these couple of days, literary geographies, and I wanted to focus a little bit on London's cartography in the production. I've got a quotation of a critic, Seth Rudy, and he analyzes. He says the multiple layers of dramatic representation in the novel. We know about Dickens's love for theatre, and how he saw London as a stage. And I definitely saw London as a stage in your production. But I was wondering if you could explain to our audience today, how did you achieve that? Because, well, you did it in many and various ways.
Yes, and I really feel for your students because they're having to sit through this strange man from England talking about a show they never saw. And like, how can we make that interesting? How can we make it not seem like a party they weren't invited to? I mean, it will be the NT at home, and the songs are now on Spotify. I think they've been released. But maybe what I could say is to your students, the question was, how do we represent the teeming organism of London with all the layers that Laura mentioned? And how do we do a river? And at the same time, there is a big question in English theatre about the carbon footprint, the environmental impact of what we're doing. And a lot of money gets spent on sets, and then those sets are thrown away. And I'm part of an initiative, a kind of environmental activist initiative in theatre about how we tell stories. So one thing I was thinking about, Laura, was the political idea of degrowth. So there's a view that the radical way forward is to consume less, to resist the cancerous growth dynamic of capitalism, and actually huddle in together. And maybe that would mean telling stories kind of around a campfire, being very simple, not needing spectacle. And that's how I think theatre always wins, when it's about soul and the body and the word and the imagination. So I tried to strip back as many things as possible on stage so that the audience would imagine, we're in a lawyer's room now, just by the way the bodies are behaving, and now we're in the gutter, and now we're in Noddy Boffin, the wealthy man in Hampstead's house. And you might just do that with a chair or something. And that was lots of fun. And the heritage I drew from was Bertolt Brecht, Peter Brook, Complicité, great artists that suggest worlds through economy, poetic economy. And
Okay,
I don't think, but I did my best.
Well, that's definitely you did. And when I was looking at Jack Knowles' lighting design, I thought it was extremely poetic, and it really brought me into the movement of the time. I believe that must have been technically very difficult to achieve during the show.
Yes. I wish we had a longer period, like in Spain, to practice. For your students, the National Theatre has a series of flying lighting bars that are used generally between scenes, or when you are changing the repertoire, these bars fly up, move, they're all automated. And my designer said, perhaps the way the lighting bars move, and also the stage can move, could be evocative of the tide. Then we can start feeling the myth of the book, that the river gives, the river takes away. The river is this primal force, and you've got your amazing thing in Valencia where there's a river that dried up and you've made it into this incredible green walkway and cycleway. I mean, rivers are mythically and in the psychogeography very powerful in cities. And to be more specific to the question, with the designer and the lighting designer, we started to find that the automation, which is not really my interest, started to become very interesting as an element of pulsing and swaying that gave us an emotional feel, and also the notion of the primordial tide of London.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was very beautiful, and I very much enjoyed that. Thank you. I'm going back to the idea of the portrayal of London, because I think that London is also portrayed through the characters, and the characters as a chorus. I think this is a very choral play, and I was thinking about your long experience in directing Greek plays, and also I was wondering to what extent your approach to classical theatre and classical tragedy had an influence in the construction, the portrayal of the chorus in this production.
That's a really perceptive comment. And to all your students, I would say, if you're interested in making theatre, having a go at a Greek play, having a go at, a great classical Spanish play, a Shakespeare, equips you with a way of seeing plays that can really help your craft. And of course, the book, Larry, you would know, has maybe 180 characters. And we had to find a way of condensing that world into 3 hours of stage experience. But it felt to me interesting that the whole company could be a chorus of workers, of the people that drive London. And I was blessed and lucky to have a group of actors, and I've worked very hard in the casting, looking at character and thinking about their generosity of spirit, that they all really committed to, yes, in this scene I move a chair, place it there, so the teacup lands there, and then I form part of this chorus in a song. There were so many people in the room, Lara, on the first day of rehearsal, 45, to ask the music department to give me a drum so that I could be heard just by banging a drum, by speak. It was so overwhelming, the sheer volume, that I could hardly walk on the first day because my back seized up, because I'm a quiet, shy introvert. But the engine room of these actors and the crew and the team all working together with a common aim was absolutely inspiring to me, and I found the whole process very energizing. So that was a very good lesson for me, that committing and being courageous and surrendering to a volume of people, even though I was terrified of it, was very nourishing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this, such personal, I would say, experience with us. I would like to share with you a comment of a review by Lawrence Jackson, publishing in the London Journal. And he claimed that the play mixes elements of Victorian melodrama, psychological realism, London cartography, poetry of place, and live music. And from all these quotations, I wanted to highlight the idea of melodrama, because, Dickens has been widely adapted to the stage as a melodrama. So I was wondering to what extent you were drawing in your production to these past performances of Dickens as a melodrama, to these sort of 19th century melodramatic elements.
Okay, great. It was my intention to avoid melodrama because I feel the convenient, easy way we see Dickens is a series of working class grotesque characters and a style of acting that is kind of like a gargoyle. and the social comedy of the upper classes. And for me, that wasn't interesting. And I just sought to be very truthful with the acting and the Stanislavskian circumstances of each scene. But the plot, perhaps, has some melodrama. There are multiple deaths. There is some sentiment in the love story. And a real problem with the book is that the sexual politics, in terms of Dickens's lens on young women, feels quite old-fashioned. And indeed, sexuality is quite latent, it's pushed down. So how can you find a way of being true to the book, but allowing my 23-year-old daughter to come and think, oh my God, that's about us now, you know? And that required a little bit of, what would you call it, surgery or repositioning. We decided we'd make the center of the play two of the female characters, Lizzie Hexam and Heather Wilfer. And that was so exciting, feeling that these two protagonists were kind of aware of each other, sort of marked each other. You followed one story, another story, and then there was an entwinement. And for your female students, I would say, even if on the page sometimes the way Dickens describes women is a bit romantic, I think underneath he has the empathy to feel into how difficult it is being a woman in 19th century industrial England. And there's a energy in the book around that.
Thank you very much, because female characters was something that I wanted to touch briefly upon. Sorry, I lost that.
So I keep jumping ahead and answering the next question before you answer.
Yes, you do. Before going into the female characters, I wanted to ask you about your selection of the characters. You mentioned over 180 characters in all of the novel. We know how cold Dickens is and how his mastery in delineating characters. So my first general question on your selection of characters was if there was an agenda in that selection. Yeah. You've already said there was a focus on female characters, but was there specific agenda in your selection of characters?
Yes, you have felt into, with this question, my wound. Because a fellow director who I like, Phyllida Lloyd, who directed Mamma Mia, and she said to me, thank you, I love the show, but was it all too dark? Did you not have enough contrast? In the workshops, when I put the rich characters on stage, and we had, I mean, not to give too much detail to your students, the Veneerings, who are kind of a nouveau riche family, or Fledgling, or Twemlow, the social comedy felt to me very old-fashioned, like I couldn't handle it. And so where I encouraged Ben Power to go was the characters that had this earthy, urgent, elemental quality, and they tended to be the poorer characters. That Dickens' energy and commitment to those characters felt more alive. The problem is, if you just have that part of the world, and the director chooses a kind of soulful, melancholy composer, P.J. Harvey, you're only doing part of the book, really. It's a part of the book I'm fascinated in, because that family I love, and that drama I love, and I love the songs, but it has to be, I guess, at the end of the day, a very selective take on the book, because you cannot do the whole book. And when I was with you 2 years ago, Laura, in Valencia, I sat with some academics and they said to me about our mutual friend, oh, well, you have to do the dust mound because our mutual friend, it has the river and it has this kind of like massive mountain of rubbish. And that's the kind of, that's a brilliant image. And when these academics in Valencia said that to me, I was like, oh, I can't do the dust mound. The river is hard enough. And then I started to think, well, hang on. People can read the whole book. It's 900 pages. They can follow that character. Tonight, you're going to see a version of it. And that's my version with Ben Power.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Because, well, I actually thought that it was beautifully dark. Okay, changes and adaptations and versions. I know we've got some members in the audience, some of these academics who were with us in Valencia in the past 2 years and have been with us in this in-house seminar that we've had these couple of days. And they work on New Victorianism, the New Victorian project. I know that John Bowen collaborated with the project as an advisor at some point. I would like to ask you about the role of these academic voices in the creative process of the play. That is my first question on New Victorianism, on the presence of academic New Victorianism in the production. And I've got a second question, which you will probably answer before I put it, but I will ask you that later.
Well, I'm an English graduate, and the role of the academic for me is so useful because an academic can talk to you, and I'm trying to find a page of my notebook where there's something useful to show you. An academic can talk to you about the personal mythology of the novelist. And John Bowen was my academic, but I also love Claire Tomalin and her books about Dickens. And they really helped me feel into Dickens's shame at the early period of his life when he was destitute, his father's alcoholism, his rage against injustice, and then what's happening to Dickens in terms of his wound when he's writing Our Mutual Friend. And academics are so useful because they're so well versed in the whole body of work, and they can help you feel into what is hot in a novel. And what's hot in a novel might really pulse on stage. So John Bowen, just to finish, and I'll try and find my page, he said that Dickens's shame at being observed working in a blacking factory when he was 12 was a wound in a private crypt in his heart. And that really helped me think about some of the characters in the play. There's an amazing character in the book called Charlie Hexam. He's one of the cleverest people in the book. He's one of the poorest people. He's very imaginative. He could be in hard times, actually. He could be one of the bright kids. And gradually, through the academy grad grind-like system of teaching in Our Friend, he becomes robotic. And that felt to me really so core to Dickens. And reading a lot of academia and talking to academics helped me feel into that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Going on or continuing with the New Victorian project and going back to the female characters. I'm going to try not to be a spoiler here because I know that only tomorrow the play is premieres in NT Home. yeah, I don't want to be a spoiler for the audience who would like to watch the play
Just
through this.
found so like Dickens's wound. This is my notebook.
Uh-huh.
What's in his psyche? What is in his shadow? What he's trying to get rid of, and what's coming out in a very instinctive way in the book. That's what I love about academics. Just I remember I had a page on that. Anyway, sorry. Yes, back to female characters. I interrupted.
Yes, female characters. And I don't want to be a spoiler here, but the ending of the play differs from the novel in various ways. And if we draw on the idea of no Victorianism, which emerged and settled in the academia, as you know, in the past 2 decades, one of the forces and one of the mottos of no Victorian of the no Victorian project is to go back to the past and perhaps give voice or a different voice to characters and perhaps redeem the past. So I don't know to what extent you took this into consideration, bearing in mind the idea of no Victorianism, but it certainly happens in the novel with regards to the 2 female characters that you were mentioning before. So I was wondering if you could develop a little bit on that.
I don't know about New Victorianism, but I understand the spirit of it, and Ben Power would have come to the same conclusion as the New Victorians. So the novel ends with what I would call heteronormative closure, and Dickens, in his kind of need to be looked after, makes wives and mothers of the independent female protagonists. And the whole last 100 pages of the book is Dickens kind of cultivating Bella Wilfer into the best wife ever. In our version, it felt really more contemporary to push against that heteronormative, pacifying closure and to try and find some angles and possibilities that young women watching it now would think, yeah, what's going to happen now? You know, she's now maybe tentatively in charge of her own destiny. And that was so much to do with Ben Power's brilliance of the writing. And it felt to me politically and in terms of the culture of what you're saying about New Victorianism, a really good way of using the book to speak now.
Thank you very much, because at least for me as a member of the audience, I thought that was it. That made a difference from the novel. We have barely 5 minutes to go, so I'm gonna ask you just a couple of more questions. One of them is because I remember we also talked about this when you were last in Valencia. How is London Tides different from other 19th century or 19th century inspired based plays that you have directed in the past in terms of your approach to the 19th century?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Ibsen, for example, who I think loved Dickens, you can really see how, just in terms of writers, they are both chronicling what is happening to Western capitalist societies in terms of labor, in terms of nature, in terms of what is being done to cities to make these governments and these societies work. So when I think about directing Ibsen, for example, and maybe Chekhov is related, I feel the ideas and the kind of warning and the kind of yearning from the inside of the playwrights and the novelists is similar. But of course, directing Uncle Vanya, which is sort of perfect, it just like a clock, the way it works, is very different to the effort required to find a way of sewing together a new adaptation. Requires such an enormous amount of work, particularly from the playwright.
Yeah, thank you so much. Perhaps one last question. I wanted to ask you about your next project. If you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, the economic conditions of theatre are becoming unsustainable. And if you take an area of the world where theatre is very historically potent, Broadway in New York, Broadway has become almost like Disneyland, and the tickets are so expensive, they're $300, that these spectacles in the Disneylandification of Broadway can only be experienced by the elite. So my next project is to find a way of producing work in New York on very cheap tickets with a manifesto that feels progressive, like alphabetical billing, equal pay. Maybe there's no set, maybe it's just the actor and the word. So it's a kind of democratizing people's palace where 2 planks and a passion, you can produce exciting work. So that's what I'm consumed with as an idea.
Well, thank you so much, because that makes me think about the 19th century again, and the popular stages of the 19th century, and how theatre was lived on the streets, in fairs, almost everywhere. It was a pulse and a very powerful cultural product, I would say, in the 19th century. Well, I regret to say, because I'm enjoying this session very much, that it's already quarter to 4 here in Spain, quarter to 3 in England. But I'm sure that the audience might have some questions for you, want to ask you. So if you want, we can open the floor to questions.
Thank you. Will they be on the chat, or will they be audio?
Yeah, I'm checking the chat, because I know that some of the students who are in the room, in the classroom, would be using chat through my colleague Sarai, and the rest of the members in the audience, welcome to open the cameras.
Okay, super.
And ask questions, or perhaps through the chat room.
Oh, I can see a chat.
Yeah. Okay, so Luna, she asks, as an amateur actress in my village, I was wondering if you had ever tried to use smells to introduce a certain place.
I absolutely love that question. And theatre should be sensuous. And yes, I have. When I spoke to your students, Laura, last time about Translations, which is a play set in a different kind of village in Ireland, we made sure we got the peat, which is a sort of earth that you get in Donegal, that's just burning in the theatre for the world. And yes, I have used smells in lots of ways. And smell technology now is amazing, because you can get these little capsules. You can say like meadow, American meadow, and they can get you that thing, and it comes out in a kind of oil. And yeah, but I'm old fashioned. There's nothing better for me than just getting the real thing. Great question.
Thank you, Luna. She says, that must have been amazing. I would have loved to be there. Thank you for answering my question. She's one of our students. If there's any member in the audience who would like to pose a question in Spanish, I'm very happy to translate it for you if you prefer to pose a question in Spanish. I think okay, Amelia, she says, you spoke about creating a language collectively through theatre to produce a message. I was wondering how you get your actors to collectively explore how to represent a specific message.
These are such good questions. I try to set up a culture in the rehearsal room through facilitating leadership, where I create a community where all the actors are able to be very active in their ideas and feel involved in the making of the show. And so often the actors will have come up with some of the solutions to a drowning. There are many drownings in the play. Or how do you stage that song? So I will have done a lot of preparation and thinking, but as much as possible, that preparation allows me to be very choral, to use your word, Lara, in the room, so that the actors feel we're doing this. And when you see the NT at home, you'll see the whole thing begins with the actors coming out of the, could be the river, could be purgatory, could be some sort of abyss, and getting up. And as you said, this is a story about London. We're all telling this together. And I think that collective effort, fortunately, everyone bought into.
Thank you.
Thank you for Amelia.
If any other member of the audience would like to draw a question, perhaps you could use the hand raised button. Right, maybe I could drop another question myself while we give the audience some time to think. I've heard some of your past interviews in which you say that you approach a classic play. It's the other way around. You approach a new play as if it was a classic. But this is a new play based on a classic. And I think that we have talked about this already in terms of the creative process, but how do you translate this into the rehearsal room? I mean, do you make the actors read the novel, work from the characters, from the novel, from the play?
Yeah, I mean, the actors will be working very hard, reading the classic and scanning it for details. Then we will be talking about things that you could say are the DNA of classical theatre in terms of the quest, the heroic quest of a character, the flaws, the obstacles. You talked about the chorus, things that Sophocles or Valle-Inclán or Shakespeare do in their plays. How can we use that muscle in our play so it feels classical? How can we create a coda at the end which somehow leaves everything open but is also resolving? So I think all the things you learn by inhabiting and reading classics, you can use to help something new feel like a classic, in theory.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We've got two more questions. on the audience. One is my Jorge Pico, and well, let me tell you that Jorge is a director, professional director, Spanish professional director, very well reputed, and he's working with a group of students in workshops at this university, acting workshops for the past 2-3 years, if I'm not wrong, and he's doing a great job with our students. And his question is why were you so worried about creating a river on stage? Is it not more difficult to speak on stage than to move?
Is he being metaphorical there when he talks about speaking than moving compared to a river?
Jorge, are you being metaphorical? ¿Es metafórica la pregunta? Es no, straight questions like.
As a director, I would feel like I don't want to do something which feels like showing off, like a spectacular river. I'd like the river to be in the audience's imagination. So, and I was worried about how to do that. But fortunately, lots of workshop time enable us to find some lovely ways of doing a river with bodies or with the lighting bars or with plastic. It can be difficult to speak on stage compared to moving, and English actors, they're seen as better speakers than movers. So fortunately, I had a brilliant movement director, and they did Suzuki practice and lots of exercises, and we had a whole range, you would have seen it, Laura, of neurodivergent bodies. There was a wheelchair user, there was somebody else who they have a back issue, and all of those bodies together was really exciting. Salva Bonnet asks, how could you prepare rehearsals for so many people? Could you still maintain the... I know how it was so demanding, but we had 6 weeks, and the details in every character, English actors, I'm sure Spanish actors are the same, work very hard. You set lots of homework, lots of research. When they weren't in with me, they were on the river or going into schools if their characters were teachers, going to meet boatmen, bringing that back. So all of that detail was in the body. And the National Theatre is literally by the river. So meeting people and learning about ropes and standing by the river, doing rituals, thanking the river, all of those things became part of being a company.
Thank you. If I may drop in just for a moment, I wanted to go back to your idea of the bodies, because that was also a question that I wanted to pose during the interview. And to what extent your use of the bodies of the actors and the different bodies that we could see on stage draw from your past experiences of recent plays and recent productions in which you also work with the bodies and inclusion and difference.
It's so important, that initiative for us to reflect the diversity of the world and the diversity of bodies on stage. And my experience has been that bodies that are not normal are frequently so bold and expressive. So the wheelchair user actor, B, was like an aerialist, and they could do incredible physical things, even though if you just look at the portrait of them, they're in a chair. And I have learned so much through having the privilege of working with neurotypical, neurodiverse bodies and disabled artists about the power of the body And then all the psychology and the research that's happened over the last 10, 20 years, the body keeps the score, Gabor Mate, trauma histories, they're so useful for actors and directors, because what else do we have other than bodies on stage? And all of the work we know about truth and character, when that is visceral in the body and we feel the charge of one body and another body, it's thrilling.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you very much. We still have got time for perhaps one more question from the audience. Question, comment. Okay, Jasmine. In your opinion, how can theatre continue to engage audiences and remain relevant in today's fast-paced, digitally driven world, where entertainment is often consumed in a more immediate and virtual manner?
Brilliant question. Thank you, Jasmine. By being essential, by being what it is, theatre is about showing up in a room like a church with other people, and all the neurological research shows that when we sit together in a dark room watching something live, heartbeats syncopate, and that can be difficult after COVID, that kind of connection, but we travel somewhere together. And for me, it's when theatre has that visceral, physical, spiritual, imaginative quality that's usually to do with an actor in a space. It's not to do with, which can be brilliant, fantastic video or revolving sets. It's to do with the thing that happens between the souls of an audience and the live act on stage when we're transported. So I feel that the more, what do you say, digitally driven the culture is, the more theatre has a chance if it's true to itself.
Well, thank you very much for this last question, and thank you very much, Ian, for all the session. I think it's been very enriching for all of us, for the members of research group, for members in the audience, for students. Once more, it has been a treat to have you with us in Valencia. And I would like just to summarize all these, this beautiful session and afternoon with the idea of the heartbeats syncopates. We could get the London's heart syncopating in the performance, and I think we have had the same feeling today, even if the distance. So I mean, not the same, because we would have enjoyed it much more if it was in person. But still, well, thank you for transmitting to us all these, all the passion that was put on the production. Thank you as well for the members of the audience, and for those who are interested in the recording, we will let you know once this is uploaded in the YouTube channel. And just I would like you just to end to join me with a round of applause, digital round of applause, virtual round of applause, and in-person round of applause. Thank you.
And thank you for holding the space, Laura, so well, and your brilliant engagement and the way you empowered me to remember and to share. And thank you everybody else for being present, and lovely to see your names and the little clapping emojis.